not like it's not an important part of the whole thing. It's really laying out foundation. And I think for all of you who are already in the course, that 3 hours is going to give you a lot of clarity about how to really set up your days to get the most out of Bold between then and March 15th when we wrap it up in mid-March. So it really is important that you're with us. Now, here's the other thing that it is, though. It is an opportunity for some of those folks who might be sitting on the fence to give it a test drive, if you will. So that 3-hour program is at no cost to those who aren't registered for the full Bold. And twice that morning, only 2 times, I'll just ask them if what they've seen, they could see some possibilities for that having an impact in their lives and their businesses, and I'll ask them to enroll. But it won't be a sales pitch by any means. This is a day of training, just like this next 50 minutes or so will be as well. So again, thanks so much for being here. I am going to be your Bold coach for the next 2 months as we dive into this program. And I mentioned this at the team meetings that I had a chance to be part of last week. And yeah, maybe everyone didn't have a chance to hear that this version of Bold that is a rewrite, and it's there's a lot of really great content in there that you wouldn't have ever seen before. And for those who've been around a really long time, there's some content in there from the past, like 2010, 2011, when we were coming out of the recession, and we needed a program to not only help our agents survive that time from 2008 to about 2011, to thrive. And that's really what it's doing. We just finished up down in Milwaukee in mid-December with this new rewrite of the program. That room of about 96 agents closed between 12 and 13 transactions during that time. Now, let me say that correctly. They didn't close those. They wrote contracts on an average between 12 and 13 between that group of almost 100 people. This gets results. Now, by the way, think about that. That was in October, November, December. So I don't know about where your market is in response to the spring in this state, yet here down in Madison, it was about the 3rd of January that things got hot already. And we're seeing multiple offers on things. We're seeing the same challenges, I would say, that we saw last spring if I was working with a buyer, and that was across almost every price range. It was a race to get there, and it was a bidding war to see who got an accepted offer. All indications are this spring is going to be the same, if not even worse. And so I think your decision to be with me in Bold for the next 2 months is a really smart one, because my goal in that is to equip you with some ideas, strategies, tips, and tools, and really build some habits that will serve you not only through this market of the moment, but also for years to come. And today's conversation is really around that topic as well. And I'd mentioned this last week that I would do this program called the Top Listing Strategies, taken from the 2021 National Association of Realtors Profile of Home Buyers and Home Sellers. And that's really what I want to jump into. And the cool thing about this program is that it's data taken right from that survey that was done between July of 2020 and June of 2021 across the United States. So it's a really great sample of home sellers in that time frame, and also home buyers. Although today we're not going to take a look at the home buyer side because there's plenty of data that we can talk about on the seller side. And I think you would all agree with me that taking seller listings, especially in this market of the moment, is really the name of the game. I mean, I not to take away from buyer specialists on our teams and those of you who work with buyers, but if you're a general agent, meaning that you work with both buyers and sellers, hopefully today I'm going to get you to really take a hard look at where you spend your time, energy, and resources based on the data as to how that might be building a business or might be taking away from your opportunity to actually grow your business even bigger. And that's really what the conversation today is going to be about. Now, here's what's really cool about this resource. I am going to be providing that to every one of you at the end of the day. That's that bonus for being with us today. And that's oh my gosh, how many pages? It's 8 chapters of data and some really great charts, diagrams, all kinds of really good. I use it every year because I implement parts of it into my listing consultation and also my buyer presentation, because it's hard to argue with the facts, and that's the data that we have. You're going to get, each one of you will receive one of those as a PDF. And the reason I can do that is because you're members of the National Association of Realtors, and our NAR, that association is graciously offered that at no cost to us as members. In fact, this, I believe, is the 3rd year they've done that, where in the past there was always a fee that we paid, even though it was somewhat nominal, I just think it's awesome that we've got that out, and I want to get it in your hands so you can utilize it as well. And maybe you'll be like I am, and that is in November, actually by about mid-October every year, I'm kind of waiting with bated breath for that thing to get released. I really is, and it's just weird that I've gotten so obsessed with it. And yet the reason I have is because the answer to almost any question I would have about my business tends to sit in there somewhere. Like, where should I be spending my marketing dollars? Where am I really going to be most effective in my conversations with my sellers about what they want from me if I'm on the listing consultation? What are buyers looking for in the market today that maybe I don't see because of the niche I might be working in? Those types of things are all in there for us. And that's really what this is going to be about today. And really, we're going to focus today on the listing side specific. So if there aren't any questions, without any further ado, we're going to jump right in. I'm going to do a share screen because I have taken some of that data and I've extrapolated into some things I'd like to just share with you. So let me just get to that spot.
So Darren, can I ask one question?
10 listing strategies taken from the NAR profile of home buyers and home sellers. Is that what we're seeing there? Yes, give me a thumbs up.
Yep.
Thanks, John.
Darren, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So just back to next Wednesday, I haven't seen that. I know that was mentioned by you at the team meeting last week. I haven't seen that in our schedule or anything like that. Can you just give us a couple of details? Is that going to be live or Zoom?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So so that's actually, it's been renamed and it's called First Step to Bold. It's really step one. Now, Bold itself has 7 steps in it. This first step itself is 3 hours. So it's from 9 a.m. until 12 noon. It will be at the same venue then we'll be at beginning 2 weeks later on Tuesday. Now, the reason it was moved, ideally, we were going to be on the same day of the week, all 7 steps, from first step to bold to step 7. And unfortunately, we had a conflict that was going to impact the number of our newer agents, and that was orientation with the local board of realtors is next Tuesday. And so instead of having that be a conflict for a lot of the newer agents in the company, we were able to move it to Wednesday. So it's Wednesday from 9 to noon at the Phoenix in Baldwin. It's live. And again, it's for everyone who's registered and fully registered in the course. It's the first day of the class. It's only 3 hours. And then 2 weeks later, beginning on Tuesday, is it February 1st, I believe, Dawn, we're going to start with step 2. Now, step 2 then will be from 9 a.m. until 2:30, and that'll be the rest of our Tuesdays will be just like that for the balance of the program.
Right.
And what you'll do, and here's what's really cool, and this is a change for my bold grads that might be with me today. In the past, every time you came to each day of bold, you would be given the material for that day. And it was kind of a logistics nightmare, quite frankly. And at the end of it, then you had a 3-ring binder that had maybe all of the program in it, maybe not. We've got the entire program put together in one bound book with a hardcover on it. And as those of you that are with me today, means you registered already for the full course. You'll be handed that book when you come into the Phoenix in Baldwin on Wednesday. So you're going to have all of your material right away on next Wednesday. Now, if for some reason you can't make it down for that or in for that, that's okay. We'll make sure we get it to you when we start with step 2. And yet I just want to encourage you all to make a point of being there because it is our first day together for Bold. So hopefully that gives you the information you need there, John. The one thing I would mention too, and this would be, I don't know how Omicron variant of COVID is impacting in your part of the state. You know, it's hitting us big down here. And we do have accommodation for anybody that would have that might have been exposed to COVID or might test positive, that you don't have to miss any of the Bold program, because on Thursdays from 1 to 4, starting next week, we will be doing the same program digitally. It just doesn't have the exercises in it. So that's why it's short, it's a little condensed, but that'll happen every week in conjunction with where we'll be in the program itself. So if you come into something where you just feel like you can't be in the room with us, just let us know. And we'll talk about that next week as well. And we'll make sure that we get you set up for that Tuesday digital, so you don't have to miss any of the content. And that's, again, just because of what we're managing here with COVID. So for lack of a better way of saying it. So with that, any other questions? Thanks, John. That's I'm glad you asked that.
Darren?
Yes.
I did find out, just to finish up John's question, I did find out this morning from Maps that The Know Before You Go email for everyone for next week's first step will go out on Friday. So there will be some additional information there for you as well.
Awesome. Yeah, so you'll start receiving emails from MAPS Coaching within Keller Williams that will give you an update on homework, that'll talk about what to be prepared. Now, I'm glad you mentioned that, Dawn, because if you don't get it on Friday, that might mean that we've got a bad email address in the system for you. And so we'll want to get that corrected as well. So maybe put a little reminder in your calendar on that. And it happens because, especially when folks join us, if you're coming from another company, when we put you in the system, there's typically a temporary email that gets used. And a lot of times, because we have so much we have to go back and do, we forget to change it. So we'll get that fixed for you. If that's the case, just let us know. All right, so we're on the bottom of the screen, on the shared screen, but I'm showing you that's just the cover from that manual for this year, the 2021 Profile of Home Buyers and Home Sellers. And here's what's so cool, and I didn't even recognize this. This is the 40th year that National Association of Realtors has done this research and made it available to us. So this is 40 years of data, which I don't know about you, it made me feel old when I heard that. So I'm like, oh man, I kind of almost remember the first ones. I don't actually remember the first ones, but I remember probably number 5 on. There's a couple of things that was interesting about that, though, and they did just a compare and contrast between the consumer of 1981 and the consumer of 2021. And so I just thought I'd share a couple of these with you that said the first-time home buyers back in 1981, 44% of the buyers surveyed were first-time home buyers. That was a big percentage. In 2021, it was 34%, which is, we've been averaging between 31 and about 35% first-time home buyers in almost every market for the last 11 years. We had a bit of an anomaly back in the middle of the recession because there were some incentives to get more first-time buyers into housing. And so that took our percentages up a little higher, then it corrected itself in 2011 and 2012. But we've been averaging about, I would say it this way, about a third of our markets in almost every market is first-time home buyer. And that's on a national level. Now, you might have micro markets where you do your business, and it might be slightly different than that. That's the national average. Now, here's what's interesting. Age of buyers at the time, the median age of the first-time home buyers, though, that's gone up. Now, that's a little bit of a concern. And here's why. And I think I know why that is. But in 1981, it was 29 was the average, or the median age of the first-time home buyer. Now it's 33. Anyone have a thought? And by the way, I forgot to mention, this could be interactive. You just have to unmute yourselves and jump in. But if you have a thought about what that could be impacting that number as to why it's 33 as the median age, what do you guys think?
Student debt.
Say that again, because you're right.
Student debt.
Yes, thank you,
College
Julie.
loans.
Yes, it's student debt. It's student debt, and that's impacting us. That's impacting our businesses, and it's impacting now how early someone might jump into becoming a homeowner. Now, in the long run, that's the concern, is that means that they may have less time in their entire lifespan to be buying and selling real estate. So we might start seeing some shortening of maybe the number of transactions you may have to be able to help people with over that time, and those types of things. So a little concerned about it. If it doesn't get under control, which everyone talks about, but no one seems to do anything with. And some of you probably have boomerang kids, right? That they went off to college and now they're back living with you. So it's just something to be mindful of, for lack of anything else. Now, a couple other things they compared and contrast. In 1981, Al Gore had not invented the internet yet. That's as good as the jokes get today, guys. But no, so the use of internet in a home search or anything from a real estate related didn't exist, because it didn't really exist, at least not on a public perspective. Now, 95% of those surveyed use the internet for their search. In fact, it can't get much more than that as far as where they start the process. Also, back in 1981, 22% used a newspaper for their search, and now it's just 7%. And I was telling some of my agents here in Madison a couple of weeks ago, I'm like, yeah, I remember when my newspaper bill for my ads, because I'd run a little classified ad in a Sunday paper, the Wisconsin State Journal, for all the listings we had. That used to run between $400 and $500 a month in some cases, just for the listings I had. And I don't miss those days whatsoever. So, money shifts, and where we're putting our marketing dollars to work is different. But what I'm grateful for is that I've got a lot more insight on the data because of how we're using it today versus back then. I couldn't really judge how the ads impacted anything, now I can, because I can see a lot of the back end data that's collected from the online tools that we're using, like the Facebook platform in Command for our placement of ads there. Also, 1981, 93% of buyers financed the home they purchased. Here's what's interesting: 87% financed the homes in 2021, meaning they had a mortgage of some sort. Interesting. Now, typical down payment back in 1981 was 20%. Now it's 13%. Again, that's the typical percentage. And one of the things that's interesting in that, and the reason I mentioned that number, is that I think there are still potential buyers out there that have been told from maybe parents or grandparents, relatives, friends, that you got to have 20% saved in order to become a viable home buyer. Now, in the market of the moment, that may still be true, right? To become competitive in that multiple offer scenario, you may have to have that opportunity to have some extra cash so that you can close a gap on appraisal and some of the things we dealt with through the last couple of markets of the spring, and we're going to do the same thing again. Yet there is money available for as low as 4%. And so, buyers don't necessarily know that. I think there's an opportunity for us to make sure we're spreading the word. Also, back at 81, the 76% share bought single family homes, meaning there was more than one adult in there. Now it's 82%. Let me say this correctly. Single family was 76% of the purchases were single family. Now it's 82% in 2021. And then bought through an agent. Here's the number that I'm so excited about. I got into the industry in 1989, and it was in the early 90s. I think it was Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, co-founder, said something like, there will be no need for some of these services that people have jobs in, like travel agents, real estate agents, any of these service jobs that we get paid a commission for the service we provide. In fact, he was working to get us to be obsolete. And what you're going to see in one of the diagrams I'll share with you is that that's just the opposite. In fact, the number of consumers working with real estate agents has risen since then. And you see last year's 87%. 87% bought through an agent. Sellers are similar. Actually, it's a little bit higher number on the seller side as far as percentage working with an agent. And I think that says a lot about who you are each and every day, and that you're providing great service at a I think I would argue a reasonable price for the biggest financial transaction most consumers have in their lifetime, at least up to that point. And they see that when you're good at what you do. Last one is age of the repeat buyer. Now, this is another number that's kind of alarming to me. Back in 1981, remember, the first time buyer was at age 29. They repeated at age 36. It's now 56. 56 years old. So that's where I talked about we're losing an opportunity for probably one more set of transactions in someone's lifespan because of some of the factors that are contributing to what's happening within our housing market. And again, just it is what it is. This isn't to be alarmist. It's not to say, oh, I should get out of the industry by any means. This is just looking at the numbers. The numbers are, the reality of what we deal with. And then, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at, first and foremost, kind of who the seller really is. Like, what is that seller of today? And I don't know about you. I know that for me, one of my biggest challenges is finding enough sellers right now. And we hear things like, oh, I don't want to be homeless, right? Because they're afraid that if they put their home on the market, it's going to sell so quickly that they won't have a chance to find what's next, which is not untrue and not a possibility by any means. Although the flip side is they may never see a time that they can capitalize on the sale price of that real estate that they own as this next few months. I mean, never see it again. Now, I can't say it will be at its highest because I don't have a crystal ball, but the only way I'll know when the markets are turning is when they start to turn back down. And then we'll know if we've hit that peak. So to try to time that is really kind of a fool's game, because you never can really do that. I think you just have to get comfortable with whatever that number is that's going to make them comfortable with that sale. So let's take a look at the first one as to who they are. Well, talked about this on the buyer side was that 34% of buyers last year were first-time home buyers. 32% of sellers were first-time home sellers. And so 68% were repeat sellers. Now, that's interesting to think about, and I just want to kind of connect the dots on this. If we think back 10 years, which up until this year, the average tenure in a home for a seller was 10 years. It was the longest it had ever been in the 40 years that NAR has been tracking it. And that, so if it was 10 years as the average time That would put those first-time sellers back to 2011, which is when we saw a big increase in first-time home buyers because of the incentives that had been offered. There were tax credits. There was some there's incentives on the federal government side. And so that would make sense that that group of people that came through in 2011 would be that group of sellers now. Now, I mentioned it to you because one of the things that you may want to start thinking about is looking at the data in your own market to really start to be really more smart about how you might be targeting your message for potential sellers. And that would be to look at who's been in their home at least, I would go to 8 years. I'll show you that data in a minute, but who has been in their home at least 8 years? And if they've been in there at least 8 years, and maybe you can find a pocket, maybe a new construction neighborhood that's the case, and there hasn't been much turnover, chances are that's going to begin. And so that may be where I would put a little more time, energy, and resource so I can be the person that comes top of mind to them when the time is right. And so then 68% were our repeat sellers. So that's just the data, right? Now let's take a look at the age of the home sellers. This is a little interesting. 13% of our home sellers last year were age 18 to 34. So that's not surprising if the median age of those getting started was 33 or 32, that wouldn't be a big number. Look at this group 35 to 44. That was 22%. 22%. 15% were 45 to 54. That's that Gen Xer, right? Because baby boomers are probably in their, I think technically it's age 58 now, 57 and up would be baby boomers. And that's our second really biggest category from a population perspective. So if I looked at that, age 35 to 44, age 55 to 64 was 24%. That is 46% of sellers in the market last year were in one of those two age categories. 65 and up looks like a big number, and it is because we combined a couple of the categories. And really, though, that's that last sale to maybe downsize into something assisted living, easy care type of place. Maybe it's to move out of state to somewhere warm, that category as well. Not that it's not a viable market and is one you may look at, but I always look at this. I think that age 35 to 44 is a great group. It's it's the largest population of a generational population that we've ever seen. And then baby boomers are the second group, right? They were the largest, and that's really that group there. If you were to put your marketing together to really target a message to one of those groups or bifurcate it so that you've got a message for both, because it would be a different message, I think. But that's where we start looking at this data and say, how can we use this to help us be smarter in where we're spending our ad dollars and how we're getting our impact out there as far as who we are. So the next thing we're going to look at then is the primary reason for selling. And now this is an interesting one as well, because I think a lot of us all have assumptions that we probably know what that is. What I'm giving you is the top two categories in almost each one of these areas we look at, because those by far are the biggest percentage. And then everything else becomes nominal. And in the full report, you'll see all of the other categories, but they'll drop off dramatically. And in my mind, they don't have much impact. If I can really set up my strategy around my messaging and my marketing for the highest percentage categories, then I'm going to have a better opportunity, I think, to just to have growth happening in the business. Let's take a look at the primary reason for moving. This was number one last year, to be closer to friends and family. 18% of sellers said they sold to be closer to friends and family. Now, number two reason was this: their home was too small. That's 35% of sellers where they wanted to be closer to friends and family, or they decided their house was too small. What 5-word thing was the reason for this? Those numbers growing? Like, do you think this last year? I think it's a pandemic, isn't it? I think COVID has a lot to do with this. Especially the home too small. Here's what's interesting. Probably 12 or 15 years ago, the housing industry economists were saying that the big, and they call them, the McMansions, these big 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 square foot homes that were getting built in some cases on, a quarter acre or less city lot. And, the footprint was taking up the whole lot. They said that the generation coming behind the generation building those homes had no desire for big homes like that. And so they were predicting that these neighborhoods that were full of these, what they called McMansions, would become rundown desolate and possibly even slums in the cities. Like the neighbors don't want to live in. And I'll tell you, I think this is telling us it's changing. People have realized two things. Number one is that because they've been forced to work from home initially, that the space they had probably wasn't conducive for business and home life, and so they wanted more space for that. And the other was that in many cases, employers are giving people the opportunity to either stay working from home full time or do a hybrid between going into their company and then being at home. And so that space need is still there. And then closer to friends and family, I think, absence makes the heart grow fonder, doesn't it? And so when we were forced to be kept away, I think it made people feel the need to be closer. And so we're seeing that kind of movement. And the other piece of it too is that because of the work at home opportunity for many people, there is a lot more flexibility in location of where they live for employment. What I heard yesterday that there were over 44 million people quit their jobs in the last quarter of last year, 4 million in the United States alone, meaning they just, for various reasons, but one of the predictors is that people just said, this isn't worth it. I'm going to go do something else that fulfills me or something to that effect. And we've got a crisis coming on that front with an employment perspective, but that's not this conversation today. So, but that's 35%, right? So closer to friends and family, home is too small. Now, the reason I share that with you, again, I always think about it this way. What would my messaging be if those are the top two reasons that people decide to sell? And what could I put together that might strike that chord that they would reach out to me? And that's really what we're talking about in how we look at this today. I look at it from really a marketing perspective. And then the next piece is really the sales method used. Let me get this correctly, by sense of urgency. Let's talk about this one. It was interesting because in the early days of the run up to the market of the moment, with low listing inventory, with new construction really lagging demand in almost every market, predominantly because of the recession and the businesses that disappeared during that time not coming back. And then now we're adding on top of it the challenges with logistics of getting supplies off of ships and across the country and into backyards so they can be used in construction, all that stuff. That we would think that urgency doesn't matter, but urgency matters for sellers as much as it does for buyers. And I say this too because I think one of the potential mistakes that we could make, especially in the market of the moment, is that we could believe that it wouldn't matter what the price is, the house will sell no matter what. And all you have to do is go to your local MLS and pull up expired listings. And you will see that almost any given day, that depending on the market that you're watching, there's always expireds, just like there's always new listings. And so there are some sellers that without a strong sense of urgency may tend to overprice their home and ultimately then not succeed. I share that with you because I don't want you to fall into that trap. I work with a number of our newer agents here in Madison and had this conversation last week with one, and he was just so disappointed because he had a listing that he put his heart and soul into, and he really did above and beyond this was an out-of-state seller. And the listing expires on the 15th of this month, so in the next couple of days. And he said, I've got all this time, energy, and money invested, and I don't think she's going to extend the listing. And I said, yeah, unfortunately, you and I had this conversation when you took it that you let her kind of bully you into pricing it way too high, and it was way too high for the market that it was in. And yet this is a seller who lives in California, now in Texas, and just thinks that like Austin, Texas is crazy where she is, that should be what this little town in Southwest Wisconsin is, and it's not. And so it's sat there, and now it's vacant going through winter, and it's had some challenges because of that, and he's losing that listing. And I just said, if I could write off the mistakes I made of my first couple of years of taking overpriced listings as losses, I probably still wouldn't be paying income tax, right? It's just one of those lessons we have, unless we choose to not let it happen. Urgency is still a key in this game, and it is in today's market no different than it is in any other type of market as well. Now, let's talk about sale methods used by urgency, though. So all of that being said, that it's still an important thing, and that never in our history of tracking these numbers have sellers used a broker or an agent at a higher percentage than right now. Sellers, right? 90% of sellers used a real estate agent or broker last year in their transactions. 90%. That's the highest it's been. That's an exciting number for me, because I think what it tells us is that they value us and they value what we bring, as long as we do that for them, and they see the value in it. And so I know there's, in markets like this where the inventory is low, and there's a thought that it's easy to sell a piece of real estate in this market. You and I know pretty much just the opposite. This is one of the most challenging markets to sell in. Now, it's not challenging to get accepted offers in, although it's challenging to weed through all of the stuff that comes in, so that you're grabbing the right one if you've got a multiple offer scenario that you can then shepherd it to closing. And that's really what this is. And I think sellers are understanding that. Case in point, the iBuyer program. Remember when that was eating up all of our headlines in the industry side of things about iBuyer this and iBuyer that, and Zillow was investing how many billions of dollars in it? They're all backing away. They're all backing away. Now, that was 1% of the market. It might be tough to see on your slide, but that was 1% of the market last year, was an iBuyer type program, where it was just a straight buyout of the seller. But 7% of sellers were successful as for sale by owners. 7%, 90% used a broker and agent to represent them in the sale of their home. Again, I think, to me, that's that encouraging one. And actually, when you see the data in the report, it'll show you the rise from where we were in 1980 to the percentage that used us as a seller to where we're at today. And it's been this steady climb all the way, even through the time when Bill Gates of the world decided they were going to make us obsolete, and they couldn't. Now, median time in a house. This was a number that we talked a lot about the last couple of years, because it hit its peak, the longest it's been in 40 years of tracking it. You can see in 2007, so I just put this timeline together, 6 years was the median time in the home. So on the median number was that every 6 years, people sold. That's back probably the run up to the recession of 2008, where in 05 and 06, I used to say you could stand on a street and get hit by a deal, right? Because it was like that. Because people were moving, and there was this whole mentality about, buy and ride the equity up and then sell it. And there was tax law changes that allowed for some pretty favorable opportunities after 2 years of it being your primary residence. There's all kinds of stuff that led into it. And that's when it was at its lowest, was 6 years, in the time that they've been tracking this, again, for 40 years. Then it crept up in 2009 to 8 years. And then we could see it then 2011, 9 years. And that was really kind of, I think, in Wisconsin, the peak of the recession. That was when we had the highest number of defaults going on. We had the most foreclosure inventory hitting our market, short sales, all of that. And so it was 9 years in their home, and we hit our peak then at time at 10 years in 2013. But here's what's interesting. We kind of held there all the way through to 2019, 2020. So we got to that 10-year. Now, for some, it was because they were upside down in equity, right? So they had a negative equity scenario. So they had to stay there until they didn't have to write a check to sell their house. And for others, it may have been that what they chose to do, and we saw a lot of this right after the post-recession, they invested in their real estate to make it, remodel it, to update it so that it was a place that they felt they could stay and they could enjoy it. So those two things are at play. Now, here's the good news. We are back to actually, that's a mistake. This was early in the morning this morning. I did this. We dropped down to 8 years in 2021. So 8 years. So we're on a trend line of going this way, back down for length of time in their house. Now, why is that important to us? Well, we know that it's that if we do our jobs correctly, and after the sale, we stay in touch with our consumers, our customers, our clients, and we keep bringing them items of value. We'll talk about in the Red Book, top of mind, so that when they think of real estate next, they think of you. When we do that right, we have an opportunity to build a really big business. When it's a 10-year slog between the time they did a piece of real estate to the next time, it's really difficult to be bringing items of value to them over and over and over again. In my opinion, it's that way. And I also think that's why a lot of agents just don't even begin. They don't even try. Here's the thing I'll share with you. When that number continues to go down, that's giving us a great opportunity, I think, to start the dialogue sooner about maybe taking a look at what equity they have. Many sellers don't know the value of their current property, so that would be an item of value or service you can provide to them. And then one of the cool things about being with Keller Williams is that within the Command platform, Gary Keller is out within the divisions, is developing all these other touch points that are of value that you're going to have throughout whatever that time is. And he built it based on 10 years. but it'd be things like if they had less than 20% down payment and they were paying PMI. If they work through Keller Mortgage, you would get the reminder to reach out to that seller when it looks like, based on the data we're getting from the local market, that they have enough equity that the PMI could be removed. You get to be the hero, not the lender. That would be one of them. When we use Keller Covered for insurance, you get to have those conversations with them each and every year to say, maybe it's time to do a little bit of a look at your property and casualty insurance. You know, we've got this marketplace that I'd love to just sit down and introduce you to. It could be the dialogue about when they get to a certain spot in their equity build, because of what you've got in command and what we're tracking in the data that's coming through. You could have that conversation with them at year 3 or 4 about maybe becoming a real estate investor and buying investment property and helping them build their wealth that way. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities that are being created for us working off that platform. And the market is going to help us now based on the indicators we're seeing, meaning that length of time isn't going to be 10 years. That's exciting as well. All right, let's see. Oh, now I've got to talk about for sale by owners for a moment, right? Because that was 7% of the market last year. Surprisingly, I think, for most of us, because I think our assumption is it would be higher. One last thing, though, before I jump into this, I want to go back on this conversation, though, about people's value in the real estate they own. It was a year ago in April, I'd heard this, that Yahoo Finance had done a survey. Now, this was in April of 2021, and they surveyed homeowners across the United States to ask them if they knew what the value of the real estate they held was. Over 60% didn't know the value of their real estate. Over 60%, 60, not 16, 60%. Now, that was a little bit alarming to me, because I think we all have this assumption that people, you know, they're as dialed into the value of their real estate as we are as real estate agents, and that's not true. And so one of the best dialogues that people began to utilize last year, and I think this was a great value add, was they would reach out to their databases and they would ask them if they knew what their value was, and they would offer to update it for them. And in many cases, that created an opportunity to help someone optimize their sale price, get the most equity they could at that moment out of their property, and helped us with our lack of listing inventory. I don't think that won't be a great strategy this spring as well, because as much as they may have even found out about it, what their value was in April of last year, in some markets, we're seeing as much as 12% appreciation on real estate holdings in the last 8 months alone. In fact, I've seen folks that bought in 2019 sell in 2020, and the equity build they had on those was astonishing in some of the markets we have here. It's happening. And so there's an opportunity, I think, for each and every one of us to dial into that. Now, let's talk about FSBOs for a moment. Let's see. Oh, yeah, this is the good number. In 2001, I just did the 20 years from 2001 till today in 5-year increments. 79% of sales in 2001 were with a real estate agent or a broker on the listing side. 13% were FSBOs, right? So that's the number. Now, here's the trend line, though, because it's going down, and that is that our FSBOs in 2006, 85% worked with an agent. 12% of the market was successful for sale by owner. 87% in 2011, 9% were successful as for sale by owner. Let's see, 2016, 89% of sellers worked with a real estate agent in the sale of the real estate. 8% of for sale by owners succeeded. You love this trend line? I love this. And then last year, 2021, 90% of sellers worked with an agent. 7% of the market was for sale by owner. Now that's only 97. So like, what happened to the other 3%? That 3% was pretty negligible. There was the iBuyer program. It was corporate buyouts. It was direct sale to settle an estate to family members, that type of thing. But it's not I mean, it's hard to even measure because it's so minuscule. But for sale by owner is the one that everyone talks about. And, you know, because of HGTV, I'd argue they think that it's easy to sell a home because they see people do it on there all the time. And so that's what they might try to do. We're seeing just the opposite, that they're valuing what you bring when you bring great value to the table. Now, that's what sellers look like. Now, sellers and us as an agents, this is a whole section in the report where it said the seller and the real estate agent, like what that relationship looked like, what they expect from us, how they chose us, how satisfied they were with what we provided them with. And I just put it this way, this might shock you though, because I think you're going to see some things that you don't normally see. Oh, that's right. We're going to hear from our great friend, Phil Dunphy first. So
what does it take to make a great salesman? It's no big secret. You just follow the ABCs of salesmanship. always be closing. Don't ever forget, great home ideas just keep lurking, mostly nearby. Often people question realtors' sincerity, take umbrage. Violators will, oh, shoot, did I say? And this is the great room, although great hardly seems to do a room like this justice. Weird, squiggly painting not included.
I actually love it.
I do too. It's really beautiful. All custom built-ins, and you'll notice just tons of natural light, so that's great. Did I need the sale? Yes. Was I worried? No. Why? Because. Because why? Because I won't sell anything I don't believe in. And when I believe, you believe. I could sell a fur coat to an Eskimo.
Yeah, Phil, I'm sorry. It's a beautiful house, but I'm just not sure how kid-friendly it is. And we have 2 small children. I mean, these stairs
Dad,
alone.
this place is awesome.
Not now, Luke.
Did you see the backyard? It's got room for like 10 tree houses. And the bedroom's got a window on the ceiling. I wish we could live here.
I wish you go back out to the patio.
Do you really?
Oh yeah, our house sucks compared to this one.
It really does. Hey, titans of residential real estate. That's right, I'm talking to you, Sandy Brewster, Skip Woosnam, J.J. McCubbin. Hear those footsteps? That's Luke Dunphy, and he's gonna drink your milkshake.
That's amazing.
Right?
Incredible.
So the buyer's coming back in an hour with her husband, and I need him. I am telling you, that kid is a genius. There's the rainmaker.
Why is your iPod in your mouth?
I'm charging it.
Alex?
Alex?
Just to put a little bit of fun into what we were talking about, because numbers get a little boring sometimes, I suppose. But, use the phrase, he's the rainmaker, as he's charging his iPad in his mouth, little Luke Dunphy. So the question I've got as we talk about our relationship with buyers, with sellers, is, are you the rainmaker? And when I say rainmaker, we use that phrase in many ways in our company. And the way I think a lot of us think about it is, well, that's if I'm building a mega team and I'm the person responsible for making sure there's enough leads coming in so everyone's busy. That's one definition. However, if you're not building a mega team and you're maybe a solo agent, you're the rainmaker too, because you have the same responsibility to bring business in for you to help buyers and sellers. And so the question becomes, how adept at it are you, and do you accept the fact that you are? Now, what I wanted to do was just give you a little insight that I tell you what, this is going to make this so much easier if you wrap your heads around this, because I think we're set up to really succeed at this. When they asked sellers last year how they found the agent they listed with. Now, these are folks who listed. The number one answer was this: they were referred by a friend, a neighbor, or a relative. Of all the sellers that they surveyed, 39% said that's what it was. Now, first-time sellers, it was 47% of them, because they probably didn't have as much of a relationship as maybe repeat sellers would have with maybe a real estate agent or a real estate brokerage in their community. But that averages out to 39% of all sellers. So almost 40% of all sellers last year chose the agent they listed with because they asked someone they trusted who they would list their home with, and they got referred. That's a big number. Now, let's make it even more fun, because number 2, anyone have a guess? They'd used the agent before. They'd used the agent before to buy or sell a piece of real estate. That was 29% of all sellers last year had used you before. So 39% asked someone they trusted who they would hire. 29% had used you before. Now that is, what is that? 68% of all sellers on average last year either worked with you before or got your name as a referral from someone they trusted. Why do I share that with you? Because I think too many of us spend way too much time, energy, and money chasing brand new business, when what we really need to do first and foremost is make certain that we're providing great service to the buyers and sellers we're servicing right now. And then we stay in touch with them. We stay in touch with them. And I think one of the changes we're seeing from a consumer perspective is that the days of being able to build a massive business, if that's what your desire is, by simply cold calling, getting on the phone, and we used to say pound the phone, is disappearing. And I don't know about you, I'll tell you my experience with that is in the first 3 months of being in lockdown for COVID, I have a landline phone in my condo. And the only reason I have this landline is because it's what releases the buzzer on the front door down on the street. So if someone's coming to visit or there's a delivery coming in, I have to have this landline phone. It's the only reason I have it. In fact, I didn't even know what the phone number was because it got programmed into that intercom, and that's all I needed it for. In that first 3 months of being in lockdown for COVID, no less than probably 10 times a day, my phone rang. and it was all about my extended car warranty were running out, or it was about FDIC telling me that I had a rental car in my name that was part of a drug investigation in Guadalajara, Mexico. It was just all kinds of crazy stuff. But that's and it was an unlisted phone number. I'm no different, I think, than most of our buyers and sellers, that their phones are doing the same thing. They don't want to get a phone call from you if they don't have a relationship with you. However, those who you do have a relationship with, let's strengthen that, because if they can trust you, they know you, that they can give your name to somebody else. That's the way that we can build a business. And here's the thing I'll just share with you on this one. We have a saying that people know people like them. Meaning, if this couple that maybe this buyer you worked with was really awesome to work with, they were just fun, they understood how the market worked, they really kind of followed the guidance you were giving them, and the transaction went really well, and at the end, they got to the closing table and they shook your hand and said, or in the days of COVID now, they looked across you on a screen or across with a plastic thing in between you and said, thanks so much, that was easy. If you got someone like that, they tend to know people like them. And how much more fun is it to build a business on people like that than those people that maybe you have to go out and you do find by doing some cold calling or cold door knocking, and they're difficult, they don't appreciate you, they fight back on everything you suggest to them, even though you know that they're not correct about it, but it's just how they are. Well, they tend to know people like them. And so I always think about it this way: where I want to build my business on people that really are awesome and appreciate what I do for them and I enjoy being with, or people that are every deal is a fight to the finish. And then when it's done, I'm just relieved. And that's just a choice we make. Now, the data is starting to show us that it's even more powerful today because of these two pieces of data. 68% of why they chose the agent they worked with was because they either worked with you before or they got referred by someone they trusted. Big number. Now, where does that go? Well, I just did the math before I got to that slide. I guess 68%. So here's the thing I always think about: instead of doing spending marketing dollars on going out and trying to develop brand new business, if I haven't locked down and really gotten solid with the people I've done business with, or if I'm a newer agent with that database that I've been asked to build of people that know me, if I don't spend time, energy, and resources there first, you're just really wasting money, and you're really limiting your opportunity. This is a lot more cost-effective way to really build a solid business than going out and bringing in new business. Now, I know that this is one of the challenges for many of us. For so many of us, it was easier to go talk to complete strangers when you first get into the business than it is to talk to people you know. And I get it. I was one of those. And yet, here's the thing: I just implore you to get over that uncomfortableness or that dis-ease about that, and get comfortable with it, because only in that way you start seeing a really solid foundation for your business to go from. Now, why do I say that? Well, they also asked those sellers, how many agents did you interview before you hired one to sell your house? All right, so 1% of sellers last year interviewed 4 or more. 1%. 5% of sellers interviewed 3. 2% of sellers interviewed 10. Or interviewed 2. 10% interviewed 2. 10% interviewed 2. So wait a minute, that's 15, that's 16% right there, isn't it? So the gap must be in the 80s, isn't it? Well, yeah, exactly right. 82% of home sellers last year interviewed 1 agent and they hired him. Wait a minute. Why? No, in HGTV, they always say you got to interview a bunch of them. My sellers I'm always in competition. I always have to go up against 3 other agents. Well, okay, maybe you find that your reality in your market, but I would argue that that's probably because you don't have strong relationships with enough of the people in your database. Because here's the deal: if they've worked with you before, you did a great job for them, they don't interview multiple agents. They call you and say, we want to sell our house. If they're referred to you by someone that they trust, that person that they trust, the reason they asked for that referral is because they didn't want to have to go out and sift through the myriad of agents in the market to find a good one, hopefully, that could represent them well. They go to ask someone they trust and they go with who they say. That's 82% of the market only interviewed 1 agent. So you're seeing a little pattern in what I'm sharing with you today, because we move into our last 10 minutes of this. I go back to this. That's such a crucial piece of this whole thing. And by the way, this is a number that's grown over the last 10 years. You could build a business in the late 1990s, early 2000s, I think, being really heavy on cold calls and cold relationships. In fact, a lot of people built their businesses that way, where they spent 3 hours a day on the telephone, finding new sellers and then getting them service, getting it sold and moving on to the next one. I'm saying do the opposite. Let's go get enough business going, build great relationships with them because of the service you provide. And then you're going to have a great opportunity to just have that become the foundation for your business for years to come. Now, that's it. It's all about relationships. It is. Now, when we say that, though, let's just take a look at this. When I talk about relationships, I just want to put this caveat in because as we move into the spring market, we have a bold law. And for those of you maybe aren't familiar, this is your first time with bold, which is awesome. There's 36 of these things, and they're on the market centers walls, painted up in many cases. I saw that in some of the market centers. And this one says, don't mistake movement for achievement. And as we move into the spring market of 2022, it's easy to get lulled into a sense of being successful by being really busy. Meaning you take on maybe 10 buyers and those buyers are all in super competitive price points. And so every day, you wake up in the morning and the first thing you look at is what hit the market on the MLS overnight, and you're making calls and you're networking, you're trying to get there first and all this stuff. And you're in a road race and they're going to make it available for showings at 1 o'clock on Saturday. And so you're there trying to get that slot in the schedule to get your agent or your buyer in there to show it. And then you write the offer and you're one of 16 competing against it. Did I just describe spring of 2021 for some of you? Now, here's the thing. When there's 16 competing, how many can the seller accept? Just one. And so when that happens, now maybe you're successful and yours is one that gets accepted, but I bet it wasn't all the time, depending on the volume you were doing. And so then you got to go back out and you got to go compete with 15 of those same buyers again for the next listing, not even counting the new buyers that come into the market for that next listing that's going to meet their criteria. And hopefully then you're going to be the winner on that one. And here's the thing, and make no mistake about this with buyers, every time a buyer writes an offer, as much as they may be getting kind of cool to it, there's an emotional toll it takes on a buyer. There's something emotional that shifts them to saying, let's write an offer on this in almost every case. And every time they aren't successful, it takes that away from them. And they can only do that so long. And some of you probably experienced it. I know we did as well. And that is they get what I would say is buyer fatigue. Buyer fatigue. And I learned that phrase from Caleb Hayes, your OP, and I'd never heard that before until and I don't know if he coined it, but I always give him credit for it because I heard it from him. And he said, that's when they get so burnt out that the buyer says, we're just done. Maybe buying a piece of real estate isn't for us. And they go sign a lease, and they typically go sign it for like 3 years because they're not even going to get back in the market. That's sad. Two things happens then. One, we've got a buyer that has a disillusionment about owning real estate. The second thing is you did all of that work, time, energy, and resource into something that gives you no payoff. So be careful with that. And what I would just argue is that instead of doing that, why don't we spend our time?
Yeah, the one that's been on the market for 4 months.
Yeah, this is 2016.
So good news.
This is how life
I showed it to my
was for
clients
us
today, and they adored it, and they want to put an offer in immediately. Yeah, so they're going to offer $35,000 under asking price. They do want a home warranty. They want the seller to contribute 3% towards their closing cost. Oh, and the roof looked really old, so we're going to ask for a new one to be put on before closing day. And one last thing, they loved the patio furniture, so they want that included too. Okay, so talk it over with the sellers and they'll take it? Okay, great.
Do you remember those days? Some of us do. Versus this.
Sorry. I'm calling about the house you listed for sale on the market like 30 seconds ago. My buyers want to put in an offer. You already have 52 offers. Of course you do. Well, my buyers are putting in an offer $50,000 over asking price. We're not going to do an inspection. We're not asking for anything to be repaired. They want a 30-day close, and they'll even let the seller stay there for an additional 4 months rent-free. You already have an offer $75,000 over asking.
Be careful with that. Buyer fatigue is a real thing. And that's just what I plant that seed. And so instead of spending that much time trying to be successful with every buyer, maybe it's to be strategic about the buyers you work with, and then taking that time that you would be spending with those that aren't really ready, willing, and able to go prospect for more sellers. Get in conversation with more of the people in your database. Really get deep into conversations with them and build those relationships, because it is that. Now, The top 10 strategies. This is not that we've run out of time. This is the perfect. We're at 4 minutes left because these top 10 we've touched on. I just wanted to point out a couple ideas with regard to that. And by the way, I'm going to give this to you as a printout. It'll be a PDF with the top 10 spelled out with some of the ideas and that PDF of the full report right after we're done today. So that'll be in your email that you use to register for the course today. Let's take a look at it. Strategy number 10, we're going to do the countdown. It's all about relationships. It's all about relationships. Build out your database of names. And by the way, here's what I'm going to suggest. Names, home address, email address that's valid, and a mobile phone number, because those 4 things are what you really need to optimize what Command can do for you from a really deepening relationship and a way to really do it in an automatic-ish way so that it doesn't take a lot of time, energy, and resources on your part in between the times you're dialoguing with your database people. Number 2, or number 9, let me say it this way. It's all about relationships. So build a habit of at least 10 handwritten notes a week. By the way, this one is going to sound really old school. It's so powerful. And for those who have done Ignite, you know that. I mean, that's part of what we ask you to do Ignite. 10 handwritten notes a week. Set aside time aside each week. Maybe it's Friday at 9 a.m. from 9 to 9:30. I've got a 30-minute block of time where I just handwrite 10 thank you notes. And through the week, then I'm thinking about our handwritten notes. I'm thinking about who am I going to send those to. That's about strengthened relationship. Those are to your database. Number 8, as we count this down, is this. It's all about relationships. Yes. Now, this idea is master your listing and buyer consultation. Master your listing and buyer consultation. By the way, when I say master it, it's practice it, role play it with another agent as much as you possibly can, so that when you're out across the table or on a Zoom screen with someone, it's not that you're practicing with a consumer. That's an expensive place to practice. The other thing is that if you do this well, in the time of the listing consultation, the buyer consultation is when you begin to ask for referral business. You set the stage for that. You set the stage for that then. In fact, you may even ask if they know anybody right now that has also thought about selling their house. Here's the thing, is people's energy goes towards certain things in their lives. They start seeing more of that. So they'll have conversations with people. That's a perfect time to ask. Number 7, it's all about relationships. Number 7, ask for referrals throughout the transaction. The golden opportunity, by the way, this is one that's missed so much by agents, from contract to close. That is such a golden opportunity to really be demonstrating that you're not only there for them during this transaction, you're there for them for life. In fact, you might choose to do this. If you do this correctly, and we've been doing this with some of the teams that I've been coaching, we were able to get 2 additional transactions from referrals, I should say, from contract to close in almost every transaction that they did. And all they did is said, this is an exciting time. It's also when we're going to have to stay in a lot of communication, because there's certain touch points we have to make sure we hit in deadlines. My job is to make sure you have a 10+ customer experience with this. And so each time we speak, at the end of our conversation, I'm going to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being awesome, how are we doing? And I'd like you to be honest with me, because if you say something less than a 10, I'm going to ask you what it's going to take to make it a 10. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to do my best to get it back there. If I can deliver that at 10+ to you, then I'm hopeful you'll be comfortable referring me to any friend, relative, coworker that you may come across who has a real estate need. Is that fair? So I asked for that during that time, during the consultation, contract to close. Now, by the way, for those of you who are working with buyers, you should set aside a time each week, the same time each week, that you call everybody in your buyer pool that's in that stage from contract to close. Touch base with them. Be there to answer any questions they may have. Let them know you haven't disappeared. Too many of us disappear after the inspection contingency is met. Maybe we stay in touch until we get the financing one, and then we're MIA until we schedule the walkthrough. That's the time to be in dialogue with them and strengthen relationship, is during that time. Number 6 in our countdown is this. It's all about relationships. Number 6 is this one, though. When your business establishes and it's running correctly, all you have to do is it's a voice-to-voice conversation with every one of your database people once a quarter. Now, that may sound daunting. In fact, those of you who studied the original version of the Red Book, it was 1,920 contacts to do a net $1 million business. That's no longer the case. Here's the good news. Do you know that a database of just 421 contacts, 421 contacts is a database that should be having you close 36 transactions consistently year after year? 421 names. Now, 421 names each quarter, talking to them, that is 7 conversations each day during the business week, 5 days a week, 35 conversations a week. If I do that each and every week to 421 people in my contact record database, I'll be at 36 transactions or more. All right, our countdown, we're halfway mark. Number 5 about relationships. It is most effective, consistent touch campaigns is that fourth is really determining how many people you need to have. And then the most effective is voice to voice once a quarter. Nothing else matters if that doesn't happen. You can spend all kinds of money on mailings and all kinds of gadgets and magnets and all kinds of things that help enhance, but you got to have those conversations. Number 3 in the countdown. Oh, it changed. It's all about seller listings in 2022. It is. I mean, it's the name of the game. Dedicate time each week to messaging out to your database around, I'm looking for sellers. I'm looking for sellers. A lot of the dialogues that maybe you've used in the past, or do you know anyone who wants to buy a home, sell a home, invest in real estate? Take out buy a home and invest in real estate. Say, I'm looking for someone who needs to sell. When you bring sole focus to that, you'll get more opportunities. Number 2, it's all about seller listings. It's all about seller listings. Now, here's one number I want you to think about: your average list price to sale price ratio. Your average list price to sale price ratio. If you're tracking that through your MLS, you may have a number that's really, really favorable. We do that. I mean, on average, our listings are selling over 100% of list price to sale price on average as a firm here. The entire company is that way. We are number 1 on that in our market. Now, you may be too. Either your company may be, or you may be. Track that number, go out and talk to sellers about that, because that makes a big difference when it comes time as to who they make a decision. And finally, number one is not that. It's give yourself a raise. And I'm going to show you this last thing, and I know I'm a couple minutes over time. If you do this all really well, there's no reason. And by the way, I'm going to put a disclaimer on this. These numbers are just for sake of example. I know we have different companies here, and my disclaimer is on the bottom there. But this is sake of example. I'm not saying that these are the commission amounts that are charged. I'm saying one of the things that people like, this is just psychologically, they like choices. When I go out on a listing presentation and I do my presentation, they say, what do you charge for commission? I give them one number. That's what I charge. That doesn't sit as well as saying, well, it depends. And we got some options for you. And so when I get to that spot in my listing consultation, I started this in 2015. I have this pre-typed in my WB1, my WB4, whatever type of property I'm going out to list. It's pre-typed on the commission line. It says this: commission 6%-7%-8%, circle 1. Now I'll say to the seller, Mr. Seller, it sounds like you're ready to move forward with us to help you get your home sold. Is that correct? Yes, we are. Great. Well, the only other decision you have to make today is what you're going to pay us to handle the sale for you. Your option is 6%, 7%, or 8%. If I'm there across the table from them, I slide the contract over, I give them the pen and say, just circle 1. Now, it doesn't matter what the numbers are. By the way, this is just, I had to have something there, right? So we get an example. The numbers are the numbers. Here's the thing. What number do you think they circle more times than not? And I've been doing this now for 6 years. Anyone know? Yes, Julie Floor, you got it. You're the winner. Yeah, the one in the middle. Doesn't matter what that number is. It's the one in the middle. The one in the middle. So if you're always out there saying, this is what I attempt to get as far as a commission that I collect for handling the sale for people, whatever that number is, I would make that my first number. I would make something slightly bigger my next number, and something bigger than that my next. Now, don't be surprised when you get people who circle the top number. There are people who do that. And there were people that'll circle the first number. And then when they do that, though, they'll apologize to you. So you got sellers apologizing to you for circling the number that you always go out and try to get anyway, but don't always get, because you have to make concessions. Now, last thought. Agents get in their heads about this. Tony DeCello, who went to school here in Madison, is from Kenosha. He's Diana Kokoska, the founder of our Bold Program's husband. He's probably the most prolific real estate business coach in the industry. He's coached more agents across all companies than anyone I know. And he said this to me a number of years ago. He said, Darren, you know the difference between top agents and all the rest? I go, no, Tony, what is that? He goes, it's the speed at which they implement. He goes, they'll hear an idea and they'll go out and they'll put it into play. The rest will sit and analyze it. They'll think it. They'll overthink it. They'll go, well, what do I do if they say, what do I get if I choose 7? And here's the thing, guys. More times than not, they don't ask what they get. They'll circle one of those numbers and you move forward. And then what you've got down there offering for co-broke on that line on your WB1 or your WB4, whatever that type of property is, just stays the same. So let's say it was 6 that I try to get. So I have 3 down there as my co-broke, because that's what I'm offering to co-broke, and we have to disclose that to the sellers, which makes sense to me. And so they circle 7, then I keep 4 and they get 3. This seller circles 8, I get 8, I get 6 and they keep, no, I get 5 and they keep 3. There's no reason you have to. Now, if the seller ever asks, here's what I'll do, and I do get it on occasion, but it's not often. They'll say, Darren, what do I get if I circle one of the other numbers? I'll say, well, which number are you going to choose? Circle it and I'll tell you. And so they do more times than not. Now, sometimes I have to manage the objection a few more times, but they'll circle that number. I'll say, you know what, that's awesome because you chose to do that. We're going to incentivize the 2,800 other real estate agents in this market to sell your house first. So I'm going to go down across through what I had down in that co-broke number, and I'm going to raise that up by whatever that percentage is. So if they chose 7, I'm going to put 3.5 there. If they just for sake of example, and so congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. That was a great move. You just incentivized all the other agents here to make sure your house gets sold first. That's awesome. That's it. That's it. So I must be at time because my phone's ringing because that's my 2 o'clock's coming in. So here's the thing. I just want to share that with you, and hopefully this gave, in essence, said give yourself a raise, right? It's that idea. Now, remember, 1% isn't 1%. That could be anywhere from 16.5 to 33% of your gross revenue, depending on how you look at that. So just be mindful of that as you're out there. And I know you have to make concessions from time to time. I want to equip you with ways that you can keep more of the hard-earned money that you should earn. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. So with that, I'm going to apologize. I did go way over now. I'm at 7 minutes past. So let's do this. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. For those of you who can make it for First Step to Bold, bring a friend with you. Maybe he's still looking at it, kicking the tires on it. And that's part of what the program is for. They'll get a chance to see this. If you have any questions, anything I covered today, by all means, reach out to me. You're going to receive an email from me with the PDF for the full report. You'll see how robust that is. And then also my top 10s, because I've got more detail there too about some of the activities you might bring into your business as we look at that. So with that, I'm going to say a big thank you to everybody, and I look forward to working with you in the next 2 months. Go forth boldly, as we say at the end of each bold day. It's been a pleasure.
Karen.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.